Boy, you've yeed your last haul. What's good, everybody? My name is Valor. Welcome back to the workshop. We're sort of in a transitory period right now because I'm working on expanding, as you saw in my sort of 4-hour live stream where I started on the whole project. Currently, we're at my wall where I'm going to be setting up a pegboard, and yeah, I feel it'll look nice in the end. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today, we are taking a look at the MHP Arms Stroke Shellington Blaster's lever gun. Currently, there is no proper name for it just yet. I like the name Lever Point, but let me know what you think. But yes, it is a lever action rifle style blaster that uses the same shells as the Fly Point, which is just great in my opinion. Starting at the front, you've got your whole barrel and tube magazine assembly. This is the medium size 6+1 barrel. There is also a longer 7+1 and a shorter 5+1 if you want that whole mare's leg feel. I just have one of the older style handguards on here with the holes for a rail, which I might actually end up putting a small Picatinny rail on here just so I can have like a flashlight or whatever. The barrel is printed out in, I think, 4 sections. Four sections, including the barrel clamp. And the barrel is a thin-walled aluminum tube, very similar to the aluminum barrels that Orange Modworks sells, but I'm not sure if they're the same ones. If you don't want to use the aluminum barrel, you can also swap out for brass, which is what Heath does in his, which I actually do with mine. And yeah, the whole mag tube works off of a single, this is a hand coiled spring, so it does tend to wear out a little bit over time, so you might need to pull it out and stretch it to get it to be fully tensioned again. But it's not much of an issue to do before war or whatever, if it's been sitting a while. You obviously don't want to store it with shells in the magazine tube, which could compress the spring and cause it to wear out over time. Bing! Fixed it. Had to get some pliers to get a really good grip on this because it's a bit of a snug fit, which you kind of want for the magazine tube. Obviously, I think that he could incorporate a slot for a screwdriver or maybe a coin, so you could do maintenance on the magazine tube, but that's easy to add and it's a very small print, so that'll be something to mention to him later. Moving on to the back, you got yourself the body of the thing, which the barrel and the body assembly are separate pieces, so you can actually swap out between barrel and magazine assemblies if you have a slightly different setup you want to go for, where your game has like a cap for whatever reason. You've got your King's Gate for loading. Doesn't have the door on it right now because they're working on tweaking it because it would get stuck and occasionally get in the way of the bolt and everything, so tweaking it, it'll be ready for complete final release. Right above that is the bolt opening and ejection port, which all your shells will come flying out of, which means if you're left-handed, all of your shells are going to be coming out on your main side, but you know, it's easy enough to mirror the files for things, though you will need to get a specific left-handed version of the top cover because of the text. The design on the top cover of this is actually not paint at all. I actually took the file in my slicer, set it at a roughly 45-degree angle or so, and I actually set it to swap filaments multiple times throughout the print, so I'd end up with just built-in permanent stripes. So if I end up, damaging it in some way, it's not gonna scratch off the stripes, it's just gonna be scratching through the stripes and it'll still look great. Moving on to the lever, you've got yourself a 1/4-inch steel plate going through the whole thing, as well as bits of the internals. Which, funny story, I ended up breaking the lever on the prototype of this thing at Ragnarok Oktoberfest 2019, after everyone else had already handled it throughout the day and everything. I just was wanting to give it a few shots. Derek said to muscle it because it's a little bit sticky, and I did, and it went snap, and I felt bad. So I immediately messaged Heath, and yeah, he understood. He expected it to break eventually because it was just a printed lever core at that time. Because they didn't want to mess around with getting plasma cut parts for a prototype. They're going to wait for more finalized versions before they're going to get all those parts made. And moving back to the stock, it is fully printed in wood filament that I sanded and stained, just with a Minwax gun stock color stain. It's not fully taken because I didn't sand it too heavily into the filament, but I kind of felt that accentuated the grain that came from printing the stock on its side like this, which, it looks really good, especially from a distance and on camera. Butt plate, just TPU butt plate. I've been doing TPU butt plates for a long time at this point. And yeah, it's just, so it's slightly softer than just hard plastic, and if I decide to set it down, before I need to, set it down quickly, I'm not gonna break it or anything. It's just gonna take the blow a good bit. But now onto the trick of this blaster, because this is both a rifle and a shotgun, because you can load both darts and 50 caliber Vulcan foam paintballs. So you could easily have both a lever action rifle and shotgun in one. Very similar to the versatility of the Spring Thunder, which you'd expect, but the fact that I can do that with 50 caliber balls and the grouping and everything stays really, really good, it's just amazing. I'm going to load up the shells right now. This is the way you would ideally load it, where you'd have, you know, one ready. You'd have some ready in your hand. You can just push them in like that. It does take a little bit of getting used to loading from the side rather than on the bottom, which is more ambidextrous and is how the Spring Thunder works. But it's for that whole feel of this being a lever action rifle. It's very easy to operate. You simply sling your lever forward. There you go. And your priming speed will determine how fast and far your shells will shoot out. If you just kind of slowly prime it, your shell might not even pop out at all. So it's best to kind of give it a little bit of force, which you should because it can take it. Bring the lever forward, and that will bring the next shell in place to be loaded in from the tube magazine, and then you've chambered your next round. And performance is quite good. In the firing footage that you're seeing right now, I'm getting roughly 140-ish feet per second because it turns out my plunger tube had actually slipped out of place. I ended up fixing it after the fact, but the fact that the performance was still really, really good, even though I had a good leak in the system, just shows that it's a very optimized blaster. And the range and groupings were quite good, even without a scar, which, you know, Heath says that his is pinpoint accurate, which I will gladly believe him, judged on the videos that he's posted. And the groupings with the Vulcan balls is actually really, really good. The balls do seem to be influenced a good bit by the wind, and they tend to spread out a bit more, especially with like a headwind. The balls do tend to spread apart and fall more soon than if the air were still, but it's still really good that this blaster can do that sort of thing. But the biggest thing for me about this blaster is that versatility you get with both darts and balls. Big shout outs to Dr. Flux for finding those things, by the way. That has changed my life forever in terms of blasters, because I can load up a lot of those balls into a Sobek shell and just have a cloud of balls fly out at my targets. But yeah, like, so many blasters are one-trick ponies where, you know, I mean, that can be good if they are doing one thing very, very well, somewhere like the SBL, the Caliber, and that sort of thing. But something like this, where I can easily swap between, you know, long-range carbine shots where I'm picking my targets, and shotgun blasts where it's a little more close up, but I'm, you know, more guaranteed to hit my target because it's a cloud of 3 balls flying at them rather than just a single dart. That is just a very great feature. And I really hope those balls become cheaper, because I would love to buy at least 1,000 of them or more at a time. Just for the fact that, you know, they're small, I tend to lose them in my workshop. I can actually find them better in grass and everything, because they don't tend to sink down that much in, you know, fairly, you know, short to medium grass. And they're quite day glow yellow, very similar to Hyper. But I haven't got my hands on Hyper. I don't think it'll work that well in something like this, just due to the nature of the balls being grippy. And on to why you'd want to use something like this, you know, the versatility. You know, if you don't care about shooting balls or whatever out of it, and you don't see the reason for using shells, well, Wacom actually has a very good video on why you'd want to use a lever action blaster for cover-based gameplay. But to boil it down, here's a bit of pegboard and a frame. Imagine I'm crouching down and you have a pump action blaster. Well, you're gonna have to have your blaster farther back, and that means you're gonna have to be farther back as a result. With a lever action blaster, you can rest it pretty much right up in front of the lever, and you can be closer to cover, so less of you is exposed in more directions, which that is actually one of the ways I got tagged out a lot in the first Foam Pro Tour. I was using my Caliburn, which, you know, a lot of people were, but that meant that I had to be farther away to be able to pop up over cover more easily, which meant I was getting tagged out quite a few times just for the fact that I'm a big guy, so I have to be farther away from cover to use my Caliburn. It meant that my butt was sticking out and I'd get tagged. But I'll put a card in the top corner there so you can actually watch that whole thing, because he goes in much better depth than I do about this whole thing, and I'd rather you watch his video than mine, just me rambling on the subject. Another bright side is if you already have loads of shells for the fly point, you've got loads of shells for this as well. I'm really hoping that the fly point shell becomes its whole own ecosystem, because I would really love, like, you know, a pump action carbine or like an AEG type thing that uses the shells are ejecting or anything, and GDOP actually has a prototype for an HPA full auto fly point shell blaster, but other things took priority, like, finishing the fly point and this, as well as, working on filling out orders for the Spring Thunder. But yes, I'm just rambling at this point. I'd like to take some time to thank my Patreon supporters over on patreon.com. Starting at $1 a month, you can get your name featured in my videos, as well as get access to the Patreon-only Discord server, where I post sneak peeks at what I'm working on, as well as files that I've designed, and you get a more direct line of communication with me, so I can try to help you out, and we can just hang out a little bit while I build blasters, and you're building blasters, and it's all going to be fun. Links down below to patreon.com. And as ever, my name is Valor. Thanks for watching.